We are so thrilled to be able to partner with the U.S. Small Business Administration to be able to host this series of educational webinars and conversations during what couldn't be a more critical time for small businesses across our country. I know all of us on the line believe truly that small business owners are the backbones of our economy. They are the heart of our communities. And so we are all committed to doing everything we can do to make sure that small business owners have the resources they need to make the best decisions that they can make to try to survive COVID-19, which is unfortunately just done too much damage to our economy. As many of you know, President Biden announced some changes. Biden-Harris administration has been working hard to make sure that our smallest businesses, those with fewer than 20 employees and the self-employed, have equal access to the PPP program. And so we wanted to be able to do as much as we can to make sure that information and questions about what that looks like in this important window are answered. So that's our goal today. Thank you all so much for being here on a weekend. And with that, I wanted to introduce a special guest and a friend, someone who's been a longtime small business advocate, a small business owner himself, and the co-executive director of the Small Business Roundtable, John Stanford.
Well, thank you, Rhett, and thanks everyone to the thousands of small businesses who are tuning in today for a really important conversation. I'm so thrilled to be here. As Rhett said, my name is John Stanford. I'm the co-executive director of Small Business Roundtable, the leading coalition of small business organizations in the United States. Across our membership, we've been working with SBA to ensure that small business owners have the information they need in order to really act on these government programs and ensure that entrepreneurship doesn't just survive, but thrives in these challenging times. I want to thank Public-Private Strategies Institute, Rhett, Katie, Renee, and especially Ellie and the entire team. Their outreach that's happening right now in today's important conversation around the self-employed, independent contractors, and veterans is so critical. And I can't think of a single better person to speak to the important issues of the self-employed community than Keith Hall. He is the CEO of the National Association for the Self-Employed, which sits on the Small Business Roundtable and is one of the leading voices for small business advocacy in the United States. I'm fortunate to call him a friend, and I think we can all agree that his work has helped make this a better program for the self-employed. Keith, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, John. I appreciate your comments and nice introduction. Thank you so much for that. As John said, my name is Keith Hall. I am with the National Association for the Self-Employed. We represent the 30 million Schedule C filers. Vast majority of our members have no employees. I've worked with the association for over 30 years, talked to literally thousands and thousands of small business owners, and I'm confident there's never been a more critical time for small business and therefore for our country. Because I think whether you lean to the left, lean to the right, whether you're right down the middle, everyone, the first thing they talk about in the recovery of this economy is the dependence on small business. So I'm very proud to be part of the webinar today. Very proud of what has been accomplished for small business over the last 12 months. I do want to say a heartfelt thank you to the Small Business Administration for the work they have done in supporting small business. If you guys go through and look at some of the things just happened in the last week, the change in the way the calculation is for the new PPP draw, changing from bottom line to top line, the administration and the SBA joining together to open a period of time that only the smallest of small businesses can apply for new draws, which I think is very critical. The thing I want you guys to know as you're going through listening to the information you're going to see today is to recognize that your voice is important. Those changes that I just mentioned, those things weren't part of the original second draw program. But when the rules came out and it became to light that there was this issue, small business spoke up. Our organization, the Small Business Roundtable, you, small business owners, spoke up, and the administration and the Small Business Administration changed it. This is huge, and I can tell you over the years that wasn't always the case. So I would encourage you as a small business owner, again, wherever you land on the political spectrum, make your voice known. Find out who your legislative leaders are. Send them a note of what's important to you. Let them know that small business needs their help. Again, very excited to be here. Thank you again to the Small Business Administration, to John, to Rhett for pulling this thing together. And what I'd like to now to do is to turn it over to Han with the SBA.
Hey everyone, thank you, Keith. I want to thank you and everyone else participating for your leadership and all that you do to support small businesses. To everyone else, good afternoon. I am thrilled to be here to see so many people on this call. I know you're all really eager to learn more about the PPP program. As Keith mentioned, I'm Han. I'm the Deputy Associate Administrator of the Office of Communications and Public Liaison. I first want you to know that the White House and the U.S. Small Business Administration is fully committed to supporting every small business, regardless of where you live. Second, one of the priorities of the Biden administration is to address inequity that affects one community, whether you're a veteran-owned small business or a women-owned small business or self-employed. These inequities affect us all. President Biden has made it his priority to make sure that we support every small business, no matter which zip code you live in. Before I hand it over, I want to quickly touch on the news of the hour. President Biden's historic $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan. This is the plan that just passed in the Senate and will change the course of the pandemic to build a bridge toward economic recovery. And what this basically means when all is said and done is that there'll be $1,400 checks. These are direct payments to working people. $14 billion for vaccine distribution, $15 billion in grants to hardest hit small businesses, $25 billion in grants for small restaurants that have lost substantial revenue, and plenty more. Working people are hurting. This is certainly the most significant economic relief package to benefit working and middle-class families in American history. It's a powerful bill that will be a big boost to programs that help working families and small businesses across the nation, including the Paycheck Protection Program. And speaking of, I'm going to hand it over to Patrick Kelly, the gentleman who's in charge of that program, who is also the Associate Administrator of the Office of Capital Access at the Small Business Administration. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Patrick. Patrick?
Thanks, Han. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being on this webinar to learn more about PPP. As Han mentioned, my office is in charge of the Paycheck Protection Program, and I'm excited to get a chance to tell you more about how we're leveling the playing field so that the smallest of the small businesses, as Keith mentioned, can get the relief that they need. Too many small businesses are being left out of the recovery, and the SBA and the Biden-Harris administration is making it its top priority to course correct that. First, here's where we are right now in this phase of PPP. The share of funding going to small businesses with fewer than 10 employees is up nearly 60%. The share of funding going to small businesses in rural areas is up nearly 30%. And then the share of funding being distributed from non-traditional small business administration lenders like community development financial institutions and minority deposit institutions is up more than 40%. This is good progress, but we know that the work doesn't stop there because there are too many small businesses falling behind. Last week, President Biden, as Keith mentioned, made significant changes to the PPP to ensure that small businesses that need the most have access to it. Here's how we're doing it. So the biggest change I would say for self-employed individuals, sole proprietors, and independent contractors, as Keith highlighted, is that we've revised the PPP funding formula to move it from net income to gross income. There will be a period of Q&A, and we'll get into that in detail, but that's an important change. So for example, folks who calculated net income in 2020 and may have been able to access a first draw at $6,000 could potentially, for example, in the second draw with the new formula, access $16,000. So depending on your circumstances, gross income versus net income is a huge improvement. In addition, we eliminated the exclusionary restriction on PPP access for small business owners with prior non-fraud felony convictions. This is consistent with bipartisan congressional proposals. We eliminated PPP access restrictions on small business owners who have struggled to make student loan payments by eliminating student loan debt delinquency as a disqualifier. And we're ensuring access for non-citizen small business owners who are lawful U.S. residents by clarifying that they may use the individual taxpayer identification number, ITIN is the acronym, to apply for PPP. So with that, I'll pause there and I will hand it back over to, I believe, Brett.
Actually, no, it's me.
Oh, Renee, sorry, I apologize. I missed the mark.
No worries. You know, it's been a long week, and you know, it's now Saturday, and
I just assumed, Renee, you had earned a day off, but you're the hardest working person for small businesses in the country, so I apologize.
I think that's all of us, and I think that's even including the small business owners that are on this call today because they've been working hard all week trying to figure out what's going on, all about PPP, the changes and all of that. So they are the hardest workers, and you know what? We are excited to talk to them today. Just want to make sure I announce this before we continue on and start answering some of these questions. Patrick is going to try to get through as many questions as possible. We are not answering any specific questions. I know that there are tons of questions that are happening for people and their personal situations. We're going to try to generalize them so that we can answer as many as possible. And hopefully within the generalization of those questions, we're able to answer yours as well. So without that being said, let's hop into it, Patrick. First, I'm seeing a lot of questions centering around like people receiving funding for the first round for their business and want to know, are they still eligible to get funding for this second round right now?
Yeah, so yes. So if you received a PPP first draw in 2020 and you would like to receive a second draw in 2021, you are eligible to seek that out. There's one caveat for your second draw that was not in place for the first draw, which is you need to demonstrate a reduction in your revenue by 25% or greater by comparing a fiscal quarter in 2020 with the similar fiscal quarter in 2019. So you can choose any quarter, but you need to show a revenue decline of greater than 25%. But there are second draws available, and or fewer employees are exclusively eligible to apply and receive SBA loan authorization for their first or second draws. On March 10th, I want to make it clear, you still can apply and receive a second draw or a first draw. This 14-day period was President Biden recognizing that we need to think about equity and access and look out for what he describes as the mom and pop businesses, the smallest of the small businesses.
Well, that's great. And I want to be clear because I'm seeing some questions pop in on this. So let's clarify. So are you saying in 2021, you can get first and second draw, or you only can get one draw in 2021?
Yeah, so the answer is a little bit nuanced, which of course is fun. So if you receive a first draw right now, you have 8 weeks to demonstrate that you have or intend to use those proceeds before you can apply for a second draw. If you previously received a first draw in 2020, then you need to apply for the second draw, in which case you are immediately eligible because your 8-week period told, in 2020. So one of the things that the administration is currently working on behind the scenes, because we recognize, for example, this gross income change only went into effect on Wednesday. Lenders began making loans with the new forms that were posted Wednesday on Friday, that some of you may get a first draw and obviously not have 8 weeks before March 31st. So one of the things that we're working on is potentially allowing for disbursements to be made post-program end date, and more to come on that. That's a policy that is being discussed. It is not, in fact, a rule yet, but we recognize that this is a situation that we need to try to address to make sure that everybody gets all of the relief that they're eligible for.
Well, that's good that that's being at least addressed, and hopefully those rules come out sooner than later. Seeing a lot about forgiveness. Many people are confused what it means. Are they eligible? Is there a way for you to discuss more specifically the terms of forgiveness?
Yeah, there is. And the first thing, before I get to the specifics, the first thing that I want to give is just a little bit of data that hopefully gives everyone who took a PPP loan out already confidence about the forgiveness process. So far to date, the SBA and its lending intermediaries and customers have processed a third of the applications of the 5.2 million roughly outstanding PPP loans. And of those applications, that third that has been decisioned, I'm happy to report that 99.1% of those applications received full forgiveness. So if one thing that I want to take away, if you have a PPP loan from 2020 or you intend to apply for one, the goal is to forgive. That is what the lenders want. That is what the Congress wants. That's what this administration wants. And the numbers reflect that. Again, 99.1% of the applications submitted to date have received full forgiveness. The driver, the basic parameter on how to calculate forgiveness orients around the fact that 60% of your PPP loan proceeds need to be used for payroll, so for wages, and 40% can be used for business expenses, including but not limited to utilities and rent and things of that nature. And so recently, there was another fix that was passed right as the President Biden was taking office that allows for those folks who have received a PPP loan under $150,000 to have an expedited single form review process. And of the 5.2 million roughly outstanding PPP loans, 80% of those units are under that threshold. So that means that there is a expedited process for you to get forgiveness. And again, the numbers bear that out. 99.1% of applications received to date have received full forgiveness. The other thing that I would like to highlight that relates to forgiveness and could have delayed you from filing for forgiveness on the recommendation of your CPA, for example, in 2020, was there was a question of whether or not your PPP loan being forgiven would impact your federal tax liability. Well, Congress and administration cured that. The executive branch cured that so that your loan dollars that are forgiven will not be taxable on the federal level.
People say they want to know they received an EIDL loan but haven't applied for a PPP yet. Can they get one? And then also people have said that they've gotten first round PPP and EIDL, can they get one? So both of those situations, PPP have not received yet, but have received EIDL, and then also received EIDL and PPP, can they get on this round as well?
Yeah, so yes. So if you received an EIDL advance or an EIDL loan, or both of those things, you can apply for PPP. If you received a PPP loan first draw, an EIDL loan, an EIDL advance, you can apply for a second draw PPP loan during this current round. So you do have those opportunities. The SBA's regular programs are available for you to access as a borrower for business acquisition purposes, owner-occupied real estate, and those products have characteristics that are very favorable to you, the borrower. They have longer loan terms, which allows for you to have a lower month-to-month debt payment, so principal and interest payment. They have no origination fees or servicing fees associated with them for you. They do not have any covenants. They allow you to prepay with no penalties. They can be available without any collateral, and the interest rates are capped. So those are available through the same lending intermediaries that you access to get your PPP loan across the country. In addition, there are micro lenders who are third parties that work as lending intermediaries for SBA that distribute loan amounts of less than $50,000. And so depending on if you're a self-employed individual, independent contractor, sole proprietor, that's a resource partner in the SBA network that you can find by going to sba.gov/local assistance and access. And those entities are helpful because they can provide technical assistance on business planning for growing your business, as well as accessing microloans. So there's a whole host of products in the Capital Suite that my office oversees that you can access for growth purposes as we think about moving beyond the emergency phase, because the vaccines are starting to get where they need to go and we move into full recovery.
That's good news to hear. Seeing a lot of questions too, and I mean, I think a lot of people would love to know this answer. Are these new rules retroactive?
Yeah, so it is a good question. So currently the rules are not retroactive. So if you received a first draw in 2020, you can't go back and increase that loan amount by the difference between calculating the new formula for gross income to net income. However, if you currently have a PPP loan application that you've submitted, but the lender has either has not obtained an SBA loan authorization number, you can request that that application be withdrawn, and you can resubmit the loan for the lender to do the calculation under the new formula that, again, was posted this past Wednesday, March 3rd, and went into effect with lenders originating loans yesterday, Friday. There were over 4,500 loans processed with the new formula as of yesterday morning. So in addition, if that lender has obtained a loan authorization, but they have not dispersed it, you also may request them to withdraw that, cancel the loan authorization, and you can reapply using the new calculation. Those are some options you have, but in any case, you cannot request a loan increase on your prior PPP loan under the new calculation.
So basically what you're saying is, if you have an application submitted and the rules currently came out while you were currently submitting the application and it's being processed, you can contact the bank lender and they can withdraw it and you can reapply with the new updated rules.
Yes, and I would ask all of you, which you have no doubt have done since this pandemic started, remain patient but be persistent with your lending intermediary. The rules were published March 3rd, Wednesday, with the forms. The lenders digested that information on Thursday and began executing against it on Friday. So some of the lending intermediaries may be unfamiliar, but you do have this opportunity to make that request. And I suspect that the over 5,000 different lending intermediaries, which includes certified development financial institutions, minority deposit institutions, credit unions, community banks, and national and regional banks that are either federally chartered or state chartered, are at this point aware of the changes. And there may be lenders who are signaling to you that they do not want to recognize the new rule change. In fairness to them as an organization, there have been a ton of rule changes throughout the last 12 months. And so they're making an organizational decision for whatever reasons they feel. But as I mentioned, there are 5,000 plus different lenders, many of which that are lending, well beyond their geographic footprint nationwide, that you can find either by going to the sba.gov/lender match, as you see below, Googling PPP loan, second draw, first draw, gross income, I'm sure is probably on there now. And there will be lenders available for you to apply for your second draw if you received a first draw from a lender who's not planning to participate with the new calculation.
Well, that's good to know. And you brought up a good point. Like, banks are able to make, or lenders, excuse me, are able to make decisions long as it's consistent with their practice. But what if someone feels like there's discrimination? Is there somewhere someone can report? And then also, where can they go for an alternative lender?
Yep. So, you know, the Office of the Inspector General allows for complaints to be filed against program participants, and it allows you to do so anonymously. So if you're concerned that you need to maintain a relationship with this bank for, you know, pragmatic reasons, post this complaint, and you don't want retribution, these complaints can be made anonymously to be addressed. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was stood up by the Obama-Biden administration to address these very issues. And obviously the Biden-Harris administration plans to, you know, make sure it's headed in the right direction again. So those are some government bodies that you can access through the web, but there are also resource partners who can listen to what is happening, help you understand what may unstick the problem, and those can be found at sba.gov/local-assistance, as you see below. And as far as finding lenders, as I mentioned, there are 5,000 plus. There are many different stripes of lender, traditional FDIC insured banks of all different sizes, but there are also non-bank lenders, technology lenders who are participating meaningfully with these changes. There are nonprofit lenders, certified development financial institutions, minority deposit institutions, who also can be accessed and are participating meaningfully with these changes. So as I mentioned, and as you no doubt already practice, be patient and be persistent.
That's great advice. Questions about lenders. Do you have to apply to a lender in your state only, or can you apply to a lender outside of your state?
Yeah, so some lenders limit their lending footprint to a geographic area. So for example, a state, or perhaps you know, multiple states in a geographic region. Like for example, I'm from New England, but yeah, there are other lenders, and a good amount that participated in PPP and actually originated the largest numbers of units and total dollars that are participating nationally. And so if you are working with a local financial service provider and they, for whatever reason, are not excited to incorporate the gross income changes, you can look to these national entities. And this information can be found at sba.gov in terms of who's, we regularly report who's making the most loans. You can Google that information as well, and approach them, you know, online. There's either access typically online or through, you know, 1-800 number type call center support.
Seeing a lot about self-employed, and I can't even like scratch the surface on all of the self-employed questions. So maybe we can talk in general of what application process or opportunities are there for the self-employed to apply for PPP?
So I think the biggest thing to recognize that should be exciting about what you're learning today is that President Biden's announcement last week really was aimed squarely at what I have heard and come to understand is one of the most frustrating pain points for self-employed individuals, is that when you went to apply for the PPP loan in 2020, the way that the program was structured is it almost presumed that you were a multi-employee firm, because it was the Paycheck Protection Program, and your calculation formula, at least as it was widely understood, was 2.5 times payroll. And so there was an implicit or maybe even explicit expectation that you had employees on payroll and that you paid you know, wages to those employees. Obviously, as a self-employed individual, there needed to be another way to calculate relief. And the way that that rule was initially administered, it required you to take your Schedule C from your 2019, and it calculated relief up to $20,833 based on your net income. Well, if you didn't for whatever reason in 2019 did not have a number that was representative of your business at in 2020 in terms of net income, your relief number could be small. And so the changes announced last week and put into effect this week allow you to calculate that with the Schedule C through gross income. And so, as I mentioned at the outset, for example, I was working with a borrower who had sent me a note, and they are now eligible for $16,000 under the new formula, whereas they would have only been eligible for $6,000 last year. So that is the biggest change. In addition, the form itself has been modified to reflect, what Keith spoke about in his opening remarks, is that there is a sizable portion of our country who have a small business for which they self-employ themselves, and so these changes were designed to recognize that fact for the first time under this PPP program.
Thank you for that. There were some other rule changes that impacted formerly incarcerated individuals. Are you able to explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so I think this is a really great movement that's bipartisan right now, that I think is consistent with what our values are as Americans, which is to say that if you do something wrong and you atone, you should have a second chance, and you should have the ability to access all of what's great about this country as a full citizen again. And so one of the steps that President Biden and the Biden-Harris administration announced last week was that if you are someone who was convicted of a felony or misdemeanor prior in your life, so over 5 years ago, you are now eligible to apply for this program, whereas you previously would have been precluded from doing so. It does continue to restrict you if you are under indictment, if you are currently on parole or probation, or you have been convicted of a felony and misdemeanor, served your time, and it's less than in the last 5 years. But I think what you're going to see as we move forward in this administration, and thankfully on both sides of the aisle, is aggressive policies aimed at making sure that the kind of so-called check the box issues are addressed, and we allow folks to have full access to things that they should be able to access. I'll leave one last comment on this point. The nominee for the SBA administrator, Isabel Guzman, and knock on wood, we hope she's confirmed by the Senate. And if she is confirmed, I want you to know that this was an issue that she worked on during the Obama administration and is passionate about, as are all these changes. But this is one that she did take action on previously when she served.
Thank you. Can someone apply for a PPP through the SBA or get a pre-approval through the SBA?
Yeah, so no is the short answer for both. And you have to work through a lending intermediary. And as far as the pre-approval process, there isn't a quote unquote pre-approval process. It's often talked about, but what you can do pre-approval is contact an SBA resource partner, sba.gov/local-assistance, as you see there on the left, and they can help you with questions you may have and how to navigate and prepare your application. And also they generally have the ability to refer you to lending intermediaries that are either local or national to help you get this relief.
When, well, there's a few of these, so that's why I'm like, And I think the general question is, in order to be eligible for a PPP, when did your business need to be in existence?
Yeah, so this is a good question. So you needed to be in existence before February 15th, 2020. And this might strike people as unfair given that it's now March of 2021. And so a business that started in March of 2020 is now, been around for 12 months. But the idea behind that policy breakpoint was that on February 15th, 2020, we as a country were aware that this pandemic was unfolding. I think it's safe to say that we all did not imagine that a year later we would still be where we are. And obviously, we're thankful that the Biden-Harris administration has come in, hit the ground running, focused like a laser on getting relief and vaccines out. And obviously, progress is happening. And so there's hope again. But the idea is if you didn't have a business, if you had a business before February 15th, 2020, so let's say you started in the fall of 2019, there was no way for your business planning, no way for your capital planning to contemplate that the pandemic was going to happen. And so that is why the line of demarcation was set, and why businesses before it have access to it, and businesses that were started after, rightly or wrongly, it was presumed that you were aware of the economic situation for which you were starting a business, and as an entrepreneur, you needed to plan accordingly.
And I think as I'm seeing now questions pop in here, how do you know if a business was started before that date?
So typically you have to incorporate and register with your state, and there's certifications that are obtained to for your business to start. The way that the PPP process is working to expedite that, because it's often, depending on the state, difficult to get articles of incorporation validated from the secretaries of these states, is that it revolves around attestations process to make sure that so it relies on you saying that you are in fact started. Those attestations have teeth. So for example, there's over 55,000 referrals currently to the Department of Justice for different reasons. So if you lie, there are consequences, but that's typically how it's navigated.
So, and I'm only digging deeper because there are a lot of questions coming in about this. So if you have an EIN before that time, does that count?
Yeah, so if you have a tax ID number and you were incorporated to do business before that date, you should be able to work with your lending intermediary to determine that you were in operation before February 15th, 2020. And I'll just say as a general rule of thumb, I think for the most part, the lending intermediaries are on your side. They recognize the role they play to help small businesses during this emergency. There are different ways to demonstrate different things in this process, and they can help you navigate getting that documentation in order.
Got it. Seeing some questions that came in a little earlier that I want to address too about the difference between the PPP and EIDL. Are you able to kind of elaborate what are the differences between the two programs?
Yeah, so at a high level, the EIDL advance was capped at $10,000, and it is a grant. And that particular program was a very streamlined application for a grant process that allowed you to get a $10,000 advance through directly from SBA. And as was asked earlier, Renee, there was questions about, can I directly go to SBA to get a PPP loan? You can't for a PPP loan, but you do go directly to the SBA to seek EIDL loans and EIDL advances. EIDL loans are loans, so as opposed to the EIDL advance grant. So those are paid back and have like a loan over 30 years. And they have slightly higher interest rates than the PPP loan. I think it's north of 2% as opposed to the 1%. And there are different terms and for qualifying for that. Currently, there are no personal guarantees required for those loans under 150,000, and currently the EIDL loans are capped at 150,000. However, we are considering lifting the gap, so that is being, discussed now. As far as PPP loans, as we've discussed earlier in the call, were an emergency loan that allows you to seek forgiveness. It has a specific use of proceeds, and the term is 5 years at 1% interest. But it's presumed that you'll be able to seek forgiveness. And as I mentioned, a third of the portfolio of 5.2 million PPP loans has applied for forgiveness. And of those that have applied, 99.1% have received full forgiveness. So that's at a high level the differences. Renee.
Thank you for that. Seeing some about credit worthiness, and if people who have had bankruptcies, who have questionable credit, undesirable credit, wondering how the determination of credit worthiness, if you will, for a loan is decided. And also, is that the decision of the bank or of the SBA?
Yeah, so by definition, if you were in business before February 15th, 2020, business was probably better than it has been for the last 12 months, and that's an understatement, right? By definition, businesses have experienced headwinds due to this pandemic, and obviously there are certain industry segments that have been, more impacted than others. But it's the expectation then that your credit will show some wear and tear. So there are no requirements for originating a PPP loan that requires the lending intermediary to credit score you. There are no underwriting criteria that would traditionally involve debt service coverage ratios, for example, that's typically a part of a loan process. And it's not a typical loan product where a credit determination is made. It's a formula. So as we've mentioned, we changed the formula, and so that should help people get more relief by calculating gross income as opposed to net income for self-employed individuals, sole proprietors, and independent contractors. But those are not in place. I do know and am aware that lenders do have the right to be more restrictive than the SBA guidance. So for example, some lenders who do not have a prior relationship with a customer, meaning a deposit account, a CD, another loan, etc., might be deploying credit scoring, but that is a unilateral choice they're making. And again, if you're not satisfied with your bank or the lender's choices, there are over 5,000 entities that are participating nationwide. And so, you can take your wallet and move elsewhere, take your business elsewhere.
That's great advice too, that there are so many lenders out there, and it's really up to you as a small business owner to make a decision and go to a lender that you feel comfortable with. So thank you for highlighting that too, Patrick. We're going to take a couple more because we're almost at the hour, and we have plowed through dozens of questions, and there's over 400 questions here in this chat. So just letting you know, guys, we're trying to get through as many as possible. And additionally, this recording will be posted and emailed as well as the previous dates. We have had several sessions all week long, and we have those recordings posted as well. Taking again a couple more. Patrick, these questions seem to be a little more consistent that I'm seeing as well. What is the last day to apply? And does the SBA have preferred lenders?
So I'll take the second part of that question first. So typically there is a program in the SBA 7A loan program called Preferred Lender Program, and the bank obtains PLP status is the acronym, because there's everything in Washington has an acronym. But that does not apply to this PPP loan program. So one of the things that I want everybody to understand is normally going to the internet to apply to an entity that you're unfamiliar with would be, as you rightly, a perhaps nerve-wracking experience. But in the case of the PPP, the loan itself has standardized terms. So while an institution might apply more credit criteria to for whatever reason they may make, and you might agree with that or you might not and take your business out, the actual product that you get is standardized and uniform across all of those 5,000 lenders. So there's no difference in interest rate. There's no difference in maturity of your loan. There's no collateral. There's no personal guarantees required. There's no covenants. So it is a standardized product that all 5,000 are operating as a distribution channel on behalf of the SBA and by extension, Congress and the executive branch. So there are no preferred lenders. Renee, remind me the first part of the question so I can address that too.
I've moved on to the other question. There's so many.
Sorry. So
Okay.
I apologize. I got rolling on PLP, but what I will say is for folks, it was last day to apply. I apologize.
Yes, there you go. Deadline.
There
Someone
you go.
put it in there in the chat. Thank you.
All right. So I caught myself. All right. So I'm having a moment. So all right. So last day to apply. So first off, the exclusivity period, which was announced by President Biden, which it was 14 days during this round of PPP, that said only businesses with 20 or fewer employees can apply at this time. That sunsets March 9th. But on March 10th, if you are one of those entities, less than 20 employees, you're a self-employed individual, you're an independent contractor, you're a sole proprietor, and you wake up on the 10th through the March 31st and you want to apply, you can apply. Okay, so that's the first thing. So it was just exclusive to you. So now you have, maybe it's not as cool, but you still have access, right? So you still can still can apply. There will be lenders who will tell you that that they need time in order to process your application with the SBA ahead of the March 31st deadline. And while that will be frustrating, that is a fair decision that organization is making to set the proper expectations with you. However, applications can be taken up until March 31st. The lender, when they take your application, though, needs to obtain an SBA loan authorization number for you ahead of April 1st. So March 31st is the last day for them to obtain that loan authorization. As I mentioned, I believe earlier in the call, one of the things that Congress is considering is an extension of that PPP deadline. So there's talk about perhaps extending it 30 days so that it goes through April 30th. Perhaps that'll happen. It's not guaranteed. So please, move with haste. And additionally, the administration, recognizing that these changes came into effect this past week, is trying to work through a solution where you could obtain a loan authorization number for your second draw or your let's say you got a first draw 8 weeks ago and you want to get a second draw before the end of the program sunsets, by allowing lenders longer time horizons to disperse those funds. So you could obtain a first draw up until March 31st. You use the proceeds over 8 weeks and obtain a second draw before March 31st, and then the lender would disperse those loan proceeds after the program's sunset date. So that's perhaps a little bit in the weeds, but it's all to say that the administration is keenly aware about trying to optimize your ability to use these recent changes. But there is the reality that the program is currently set to sunset on March 31st.
Wow, thank you. And I want to ask one last question before we conclude, which is, how does the PPP loan affect veterans? And if there's anything that we can uplift at the SBA for veterans?
Yeah, so veterans, obviously are eligible. There isn't currently a veterans preference. So for example, the federal government has preference for hiring for veterans, which is a good program. In the past, the SBA has deployed programs in its standard 7A lending program to give advantages to veteran businesses. Veteran-owned business and service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses have preference in the federal procurement, particularly at the Veterans Administration, where the Supreme Court has come down and said that the Veteran Administration has to go veteran if there's an opportunity to go veteran. So there are many instances of this. PPP was designed again as an emergency, recognizing that all Americans, regardless of their status, were going to be impacted. That's, there have been certainly been wins there, and there have certainly been weaknesses to how this program ultimately, was deployed. That's the answer to that.
Well, Patrick, we really appreciate you going through all of these questions. And I know there's so many more, and I know everyone, we unfortunately cannot get to everyone's questions. We want to thank all of our small business owners that are on the line for participating on a Saturday afternoon, trying to get their questions answered. And we hope that we answered at least some sort of generality of those questions today. We want to thank the Small Business Administration, to Patrick Kelly. Thank you so much for taking the time out and doing this today. To Han Nugent, we want to thank you as well for taking time out and bringing those words, and also the amazing announcement about the American Rescue Plan passing. I want to thank Keith Hall, the President and Chief Executive Officer of NACE. I want to thank John Stanford, the Co-Executive Director of Small Business Roundtable, to the team at Public-Private Strategies Institute, and then more specifically, again, thank you to all our small business owners who attended today. I want to let everyone know that there is another webinar going on today that's going to be live streamed at 4 p.m. And then we're hosting our last in a series of week-long informational question series on Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, LGBTQ, restaurant, youth, and entrepreneurs. So definitely check that out. Everyone is welcome to attend all events. And again, this is being recorded and will be posted. Remember, your photos, pictures, your voices are not being recorded. This was only the presenters that were on today. I know there were questions in the comments about that. So it is only the information, the questions that were asked in our presenters. Again, we want to thank you so much for joining us today. And I hope you all have a great weekend. Thank you so much.